At 15-27, it is time to tank for the Philadelphia 76ers. We're going to see what you guys think. And if we're in agreement with that at this point of the season, don't go anywhere. We'll discuss it all right here on Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On 76ers. We're your host, Keith Pompey, beat writer for the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm Kayla Santiago, sideline reporter for the Delaware Blue Coats, the Philadelphia 76ers NBA G League team. And if you're watching us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, you can also catch us with the free daily newsletter. That's on lockedondaily.com. So make sure you go check that out today. All things Philadelphia 76ers. And if you want to go check that out, once again, that's on lockedondaily.com today. And today's episode is sponsored by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We got a lot to discuss here for the Philadelphia 76ers. It has not been a good season. Are they going to tank or not? What are your thoughts? We'll discuss ours as well. It's been a disappointing season. We're going to kind of roll through everything since the beginning, since training camp, since really the Olympics when Joel Embiid played, and break that down. And no All-Stars. It's been quite some time since we've seen that for the Philadelphia 76ers. So we're going to see what that leads up to, because nobody on this team deserves to be an All-Star at this point of the season. So Keith, what I think here for the Philadelphia 76ers, and I said this yesterday too, I think if they go into that Bulls game coming up in a few days and they don't have the effort that they have, they're a bad team already, and I think the Bulls are going to hand them a loss. But if they don't go in there with effort, if they sit a bunch of guys and they're like, you know what, we're not going to win this game, that's when I say that this team needs to tank, because that's really the only possible winnable game that you see throughout this schedule going forward a little bit in the next few games because of where they're at in the Eastern Conference. They're a better team than the Philadelphia 76ers, but right now I'm going tanking. Where are you at with this team?
I don't, a lot of people say tank, go ahead and tank. But when you look at it, what if you tank and you don't get anything? I feel like, and what I mean by that is, right now the 76ers have the eighth worst record in the NBA. And when you look at it, the teams who are below them are basically going to be sellers at the trade deadline. And they're sitting people and they're resting people. So when I look at it, in order for the 76ers to keep their draft pick, right, a top 6 protected pick, to keep it, they got to finish within the top 6 in the lottery. Right now, as in the 8th spot, they only have a 26.2% chance of getting that pick. Mm-hmm. Now, if they slide down to number 7, which they're a half a game out of 7th, and for the 7th worst record, it's 31.9. So basically, the 76ers, for them to feel really comfortable about getting that pick, they have to finish with at least the 4th worst record, and that's when they get an 81%. So while it's easy for us to say, go ahead and tank, we have to realize teams like the Charlotte Hornets, teams like the Brooklyn Nets, and those other teams, are New Orleans Pelicans, all those guys, I think the 76ers are going to have a tough time catching them in the loss column, if that makes sense. So to me, I think that the 76ers are kind of like in a no-win situation, to whereas we look at that Chicago game. Chicago may say, you know what, maybe we should tank. And what that does is all of a sudden the 76ers become the 10th seed. They have to go into the play-in tournament. And at that point, you have no choice but to try to win, because you're not playing for anything other than that. So it's easy to say tank. But right now, I don't see the Sixers being any worse than the teams that are beneath them, unless it's the Portland Trailblazers. I just don't see it. I don't see it.
And you look at the Eastern Conference too, and that's what I'm going to allude to here, because the Eastern Conference is giving the 76ers a chance to be able to actually be in that play-in contention. The Wizards right now, they still sit at 6 wins, so that's going to be tough to catch up. The Raptors are at 14th with 11, the Hornets at 11, the Nets right behind the Sixers with 14. That's just in the Eastern Conference that we're looking at. Let me ask you this, Keith. So, a lot of it is tank for Cooper Flag, bring him on the Philadelphia 76ers. If the 76ers sit Joel Embiid out for the rest of the season, if they decide to shut him down, do you still see them trying to play for that play-in spot just because of the teams below them, right? Because I don't think that sitting Joel Embiid out and shutting him down has to equivalent to tanking if the 76ers don't want it to. I still think no matter what that they should shut him down this season, but do you see them still trying to play for that play-in just because the teams below them, and maybe it's still not worth it even if you don't have Joel Embiid?
Put it this way, even if they're not trying to play for the play-in, I mean, I just think unless they just shut everyone down
Mm-hmm.
to a point where you just have your G League players playing, I don't know if they are good enough to catch in the loss column to catch the Charlotte Hornets, the Washington Wizards, right? That's two teams right there. The Brooklyn Nets, because the Brooklyn Nets are going about to make another trade. The Utah Jazz, the New Orleans Pelicans. So right then and there, that puts the Sixers at number 6, right? Right then and there. And then you look at it, let the Miami Heat are trying to make a trade, right? So the Miami Heat are 21-21. And like I said, Chicago may decide, hey, it's time to give it up. So to me, I just think the Sixers are in a rough spot right now, to whereas even if you shut Joel down, you continue to play. There's some other teams that are going to go roster reconstruction like Brooklyn. I don't expect their best players, all of them, to be there after the trade deadline. Like Cam Johnson, I think he's going to be gone, right? So with that being said, we're talking about a team. We're looking at the Sixers. The Sixers have lost 7 games in a row. The Brooklyn Nets has lost 5 in a row. So, they're like on par with the Sixers. We're just not talking about them. And then we look at the teams like Orlando, right? Lost 4 in a row. But again, I think that they're going to survive. But my concern is I just don't think the 76ers are going to be able to catch all these teams enough for you to feel comfortable to say, go ahead and tank. I mean, look at the Spurs. The Spurs lost 3 in a row, right? The Spurs are 19-22. You look at the Jazz are 10-32. They lost 4 in a row. So while the Sixers, yes, the Sixers are struggling, even if you sit Joel down, I just feel like that top 6 protected is going to be hard for them unless they got the 4th spot, which I don't think they're going to get. I don't think they're going to have a worse record than Charlotte. I don't think they're going to have, at the end of the day, a worse record than Washington, a worse record than the Pelicans, the Utah Jazz, or the Brooklyn Nets. So in my thing, if they tank, I see the Sixers finishing with no worse than the 6th worst record. And the percentage for the 6th worst record, you might as well play the lottery. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
I look at it now, too, for the Philadelphia 76ers. They can't even tank correctly right now. I think, too, for a team, when you go into the season, when you want to tank and you're saying, I want to get that number 1 pick in the draft, that's something you come to terms with at the start of the year, right? Like the Wizards, we kind of knew we're going to be a team that really didn't come out there and try to win a lot of different games. For the 76ers, this was a team that they were looking to get past the second round, bringing Paul George in with a healthy Joel Embiid. Well, he wasn't healthy, but that's what they were looking for in the beginning of the season. It just completely did a 180 for the Philadelphia 76ers as well. And I know Adam Silver doesn't want to hear this, but there are a lot of teams that have the mindset before the season probably even starts that, okay, it's not going to be worth it to try and get these wins. It is time to tank to try to get that pick 1st overall in the NBA draft. The 76ers, they're just in a bad spot at the end of the day because you get into the play-in, it's almost guaranteed that you lose in that 1st round, depending on the team that they play. It's going to be a top-notch team. If you even get out of the play-in tournament, and then you're not bad enough to be able to get a super high draft pick either, that could probably make a big difference at year 1 for the team. So it's just been a mess of the season for the Philadelphia 76ers. Once again, they're at 15-27, but believe it or not, there are some teams worse. I think the worst thing for the 76ers is the hope that was going into this season. And we're going to touch on that in just a moment, just how
Can
disappointing. Go ahead before we go to
Can I
break.
say one
Yeah,
thing though? I
go
will
ahead.
say this. I will say this. If you get a healthy Joel Embiid, I don't know how far. If you get a healthy Joel Embiid and Maxi plays and Paul George finds a way. If you have a healthy Joel Embiid, if I'm the New York Knicks, if I'm the Boston Celtics, I do or Cleveland, I don't want to face them in the first round. I mean,
Mm,
because it's like you just don't want to face a healthy Joel Embiid in the first
right.
round. Like you're like, yo, we got the first pick for this because the Sixers are when they're healthy. When we look at their record, these guys played 10 games together. They're 7-3. They finished 7 games. They're 6-1. So they do have some talent when they're healthy. It just so happens they're running out of time with the health department. But yeah, I mean, they got talent. It's just that they're just in a pickle right now.
That they are. And if you have a healthy team going into the playoffs, I mean, the Celtics, the Cavs, any of those teams, I still think they come out on top. But what I will say, it's going to be one of those first rounds that tires you out for the second round and going forward. So we're going to touch on that a little bit too on the other side, just kind of looking at what this team potentially could be if everybody gets healthy and the disappointment that it kind of has been because you expected that on day one of the season. Don't go anywhere. We're going to touch more on that right here on Locked On 76ers in just a moment. And of course, we have to hear from our fantastic sponsors. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively by finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule. It can be a challenge. I know everybody gets busy on their day to day, what they try to do. And it's always frustrating when you want to do something, but you feel like you don't have enough time. Well, this is a fantastic way. And that's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. And that can be huge in a busy lifestyle in your day to day. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans as well. And for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to provide mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $30 off as well the first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/lockedon NBA. Make sure you enter the promo code as well as Space80. Once again, that's Space80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/lockedon NBA and enter the promo code Space80 to get $30 off, $80 off. Check that in addition as well to be able to get that first month. Once again, to clear that up, it's $80 off if you put in Space 80 today. That's Talkspace.com/locked on NBA, promo code Space 80. Make sure you check it out today. All right. So it has been a disappointing season for the Philadelphia 76ers. I definitely didn't think coming into this year, this is how it would be. Now, I was always a caveat, and this is something that we discussed, that Joel Embiid should not have played in the Olympic Games. And I get what you want to do. You want to play for Team USA, win a gold medal. I understand all that. But at the same time, my thought process was he has to be 100% for the season. Clearly, he is not. Keith, is the most disappointing factor to you the health status of Joel Embiid, or is it the other puzzle pieces, the scatter ones that Nick Nurse was kind of talking about, of all the other injuries also happening for the Philadelphia 76ers this year?
I mean, I think the big thing is Joel Embiid. And from, I mean, he can come out and you could say all the other injuries, and I get that, but the way this roster is constructed, it was constructed to be led by a big three and then a bunch of role players around that. So whereas you needed a heavy dose of input from Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey, so you can say the scattered stuff, you can do that, and I get it, I understand it. You know, you got a lot of other guys, and it's kind of like the next man up mentality. But when we really talk about it, you have to say that it hinges on Joel Embiid's success. I mean, think about it. This guy is arguably he's arguably the second best center in the league. Not arguably, he is. You know, and the only reason why I'm giving the Joker it over him because of availability. but Joel's only played in 13 games, and your team is surrounded around him, predicated on what he does. So yeah, Nick Nurse could say what he wants, and I respect what he said, but that's the biggest disappointment, not being able to have Joel Embiid for most of the season.
And he's the deciding factor, right? Because when you look at the 76ers, they bring in Paul George, but how this roster is constructed, either way of who they have, it's not going to be Paul George and Tyrese Maxey bringing this team to an Eastern Conference Finals or an NBA championship. Paul George was an addition to what they already had, with Joel Embiid being the centerpiece. You're right. He's the most dominating player when he can play the game of basketball, and that has been the biggest disappointment as well for him. Keith, do you think that Joel kind of looks back at that Olympic Games and says, maybe I should have sat out? I know the gold medal is something to be really proud of, and, competing for the country and everything like that, but that definitely set him back to the start of this season.
He like, what he said no. Like, he said that's something that he's not going to regret. I mean, now again, he said that earlier in the season.
Right.
Who knows how he feels now about it? But I mean, we look at it. How many times do you get an opportunity to win a gold medal? Right.
Sure.
That's something that he has. That's something that no one's going to take from him. So maybe not. Probably not. I know a lot of people in Philly are a little disappointed with it, but I do not. I mean, he said that's something that no one will take from him. So with him saying that, I have to say no. He doesn't feel, he probably doesn't regret it.
And I said this yesterday too. If Joel Embiid, say his career is said and done after this, right? Say he never comes back to the player that he was and the injuries just keep hurting him. His biggest accomplishments aren't going to necessarily be getting knocked out of the second round. That's going to be the conversation of when you talk about the great bigs in the league. But he's going to have a gold medal and the MVP award. So that's something that he can kind of put up there to be able to say, hey, I want a gold medal for my country, everything like that in the United States, and being able to, of course, be MVP, regular season MVP as well. But something we talked about in the first segment that we said we were going to go back to a little bit here. Yes, it's been a disappointing season, but the 76ers, if they're healthy, are going to be a really tough team to play in the playoffs. Now, Keith, really the reality of the situation is they get into the play-in tournament. We see what happens there. Is there any chance that you think with a healthy squad that they could shock some people, or you think no matter what, they'll give a Cavs or a Celtics a tough run, but they're going to get knocked out in the first round? I'm talking about if they're healthy.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is I'll just say this. If I have an opportunity to play the Brooklyn Nets or the Chicago Bulls or the Miami Heat while they're, about to lose Jimmy Butler in the Sixers, I'd just rather play those teams over the Sixers. You know what I mean? Like right now, the Sixers don't have. I mean, they could beat anyone if they're healthy. I mean, the problem is they just don't have. They're just not a healthy squad. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go out there and say they're going to contend for a championship. Like, I don't think that, me personally, I think that they'll give a team a run for their money. I don't think they have all the pieces that you need to win a championship. It's just a matter of, you don't want to see them if Joel Embiid is healthy in the first round. You just don't. You don't. You know what I mean? You don't. And for them, that will be the toughest matchup that they possibly play, right? If they're the eighth seed playing the number one seed. But I don't think that they can win a championship. No. But again, if I got to face the Brooklyn Nets, if I have to face the Toronto Raptors, if I have to face the Miami Heat minus the Jimmy Butler, Chicago Bulls, I'd rather face those teams as opposed to the Sixers.
And also, too, you look at the 76ers, they do bring in experience to the playoffs. As much as people want to say, well, they haven't got past the second round. You bring in Paul George, who you hope is playoffy at that point. We're talking about if they're healthy, right? Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid has experience in the playoffs. He hasn't been healthy yet, really in a playoff push for the Philadelphia 76ers. So you're talking about a team in the first round that you might have to face if you're the Celtics, if you're the Cavs, if you're those top echelon teams right now in the Eastern Conference, of saying, this could possibly be a 7-game series. It could be a physical series. It could be a tough series. And I don't think the 76ers necessarily come out of that with a victory moving on. But at the same time, that's not a team that I would want to face in the first round either if I'm trying to have hopes and aspirations to getting an NBA championship. So we haven't seen them be all healthy yet. It hasn't been just Joel Embiid. It's been Andre Drummond. It's been Kyle Lowry. It's been the Martins, KJ and Kayla Martin. It's been Paul George. A lot of injuries scattered all over the place. As Nick Nurse said, it's a scattered puzzle, also missing the biggest centerpiece of the season as well. So we're going to really have to just wait and see for the Philadelphia 76ers if this team can get healthy. Is it too late? Is it not? Well, I think this remaining schedule is definitely going to tell us that now, 15 and 27 once again. But also this season comes as a little bit of a shock, but not really because of how they've been playing. We're going to look at seeing possibly no all-stars at all, and it's been quite some time since that's happened. So let's talk about that on the other side. And I will say, talking about games and basketball and everything in between does get me excited for live games. There's nothing like being out in the atmosphere, whether it's basketball, the NFL, the MLB, the NHL, MLS, and so much more. Now, looking at the NFL playoffs, if you want a deal, you can head over to GameTime. The NFC Conference Championship is coming up. It's the NFC East Division rivalry between the Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. If you want to get the best tickets possible for that game, make sure you head over to GameTime right now. They have super deals at the top 1% value. It is the best way to get the tickets that you want for the best price possible, and the fees aren't as much as other ticket places as well. So make sure you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Once again, that's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. So it has been quite some time, almost a decade, about 9 years since the Philadelphia 76ers have not had an all-star. This year, we touched on this a while ago, Keith, of who, if anybody, would be an all-star. We kind of said Tyrese Maxey maybe because Paul George, Joel Embiid missed way too much time. There's nobody else. Darren McCain, of course, gets hurt early in the season, but there's too many guards in front of him that are probably going to beat him out. I mean, we talk about a disappointing season. Not only is this team possibly in the outside looking into the play-in tournament, you're looking at a season in quite some time, in 9 years since 2016-17, where the 76ers are not going to have an all-star in the all-star game. That's a big possibility here.
Yeah, it is a huge possibility, but it also goes to show you just how disappointing the season was because, in the beginning, in the summertime, everyone was, writing about big threes. Like, will this go down as one of the all-time great big threes in Sixers history? But not only that, would it be one of the best big threes in the NBA? You look at it, you're saying to yourself, like, whatever team has a big three like this. I mean, and you were saying in the East, you're saying, wow, I don't really see another one. I didn't. You didn't, or you assumed, like, because other teams, when you look at it, and let's just say the NBA. So you look at Draymond, right? You look at Steph. Well, Clay left, right? And then, but Draymond isn't like, on that level where the Sixers were supposed to have an all-star guard, an all-star forward, and an all-star center. Like they had it on three different levels. And then when you go back and you look at it now and you say to this fact that you probably won't get a single all-star, that's saying a lot because it came to a point where, the 76ers, when Joel Embiid was a rookie and his other year, several year, what they would have is the young guys, they played in the Rising Stars game. And then all of a sudden, Joel Embiid goes from that to playing in the All-Star game, right? The same thing with Ben Simmons and all them. And it was kind of like you felt as if like, okay, this is what's going to happen in Philadelphia for moving on out. Now, if Joel Embiid was healthy, there's no question that he would be an all-star, right? There's no question about it. But the big thing was Paul George, he just didn't show up. And unfortunately, Tyrese Maxey is scoring a lot of points, but the team is one of the worst teams in the league, and it's just not working out for him in regards to his shooting percentage. But he's having a career year on defense, but he's just going to feel like that there's too many other guards ahead of him for him to get selected. So it just tells you how disappointing this season has been overall for the Sixers.
It has been. And you kind of look back at the All Star selections as well. We alluded to the biggest gap really was 2012, 2013. Drew Holiday got the knock for the All Star. And then from there to the 2016, 2017 season, you had nobody. Clearly, a lot of tanking going on during that time and everything like that. But Joel Embiid then goes 2017 and 18. And ever since then, it's been Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey was a part of that. And it is crazy to look at this year and say, you still have two of those guys that have been consecutive all-stars when you're talking about Joel Embiid. You look at Paul George as well. And we talked so much about the disappointment of Joel's health and him not being able to play and everything like that. How about Paul George? Because he's clearly not playing at an all-star level. And I know some people said coming in, well, this is what you get for getting Paul George on that big contract at this point of his career. But I was definitely expecting more from PG. Now, granted, he hasn't been put in the best situation, you could say, but there's situations where he could really take over. The team around him isn't that great without Joel Embiid, and I do understand that, but he's a disappointment in his own right, too, so far this season, in my eyes.
Yeah, well, it's easy to say that. I mean, and what I
Yeah.
mean by that is like, I mean, think of anybody who came here as
Hmm.
with lofty expectations. They all been big disappointments. So
That's
then
true.
you have to wonder if it's the player or is it the team. I mean, I'm just going to be real because
Yeah.
I mean, even down to Buddy Hield, everybody thought Buddy Hield was going to be the truth, and people couldn't wait to get him out of town. Tobias Harris, people were talking about how bad Tobias Harris is. Well, heck, he got better stats as a Sixer than Paul George. Um, look at Al Horford. Al Horford, everybody was saying that Al Horford was trash and he was washed, and now look at him. He's still going strong. So to me, when we look at the Paul George situation, it's one of those things where it wasn't too long ago where when they were winning games and we were like, Paul George was the catalyst. But as soon as Joel B came back, he started
Hmm.
struggling again. Now, the one thing I will say about PG is, yes, he is older, but if we're going to be real, this dude he had just as well, he didn't miss as many games as Embiid, but he's close, right?
Right.
And he had two bone bruises and he had a groin injury as well. So yes, he looks bad, but dang, Jimmy Butler looked bad until he had the ball in his hands. People forget that. Jimmy Butler had games where he had 3 points, but then when the playoffs came, they gave him the ball, and now everybody's talking about we want Jimmy back. But before they were saying get rid of Jimmy too. So you know what I mean. So yeah, he's been a major disappointment. But I'm starting to wonder: is it hard playing next to Joel Embiid? I'm starting to wonder that because it just seems like a lot of people have come in here and was supposed to be the man
Hmm.
and struggled mightily playing next to him.
And it's interesting to bring that up too, because I feel that Jimmy Butler was really the only player that came in as that star that was able to sort of play alongside Joel Embiid, but that was factoring probably out Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons needed the ball in his hands as a point guard, and that's what Jimmy Butler wanted. But you even look back to James Harden as well, and now a lot of people are saying, you see it all over Twitter and everything, that they should have never got rid of James Harden, but people were booing him out the door real quick as well, right? And then Paul George, it's the same caveat that's happening. I think it takes a really specific player to play alongside Joel Embiid, somebody like Tyrese Maxey that understands and that has played with him, that can be a star in their own right, but then also can play off of him well. But if you already have the superstar mindset that you're coming in and you want to be the guy, that's just not going to happen because the 76ers have already made Joel Embiid that guy. And it seems like they consistently, every single coach, that's the offense they want to play around because he is so dominant. But what happens when he's not in there? Then everything just kind of falls and the pieces do fall together. I want to
Yeah.
ask you, yeah, go ahead, real
Let me
quick.
say this, Kayla. Like it's not to see the reason why people. It's not. It's see the thing people have to understand. If we got to be real with ourselves.
Mhm.
So it's a guards league,
It
but
is,
when you
yeah.
play with Joel Embiid, it's basically it's his team. So what happens is he becomes the guy, right? He becomes the man, and it's like you have to adjust to playing off of him. Where some of these guys we're talking about, they're used to having the ball in their hands, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest difference. But then we want to crucify him, but it's a different way. Like Paul George, everywhere Paul George was, he was the man or another perimeter player. He comes here, you got to run everything through the big guy, right? So it's basically you're playing off of him. And with that being said, they want you to basically play, um, you know, like either stretch the floor, like be in the corner. Well, he's not a corner type of guy. He's used to having the ball in his hands and making things go. So that's what it is. It's just tough for him to adjust. It's tough for a lot of players to adjust while playing next to Embiid.
And it's tough to adjust when you haven't had time or the chemistry or, the games to adjust either. And I want to go back to your point real quick before we send things off, because you bring up the point about people wanting Jimmy Butler back and the Heat just suspended him once again. Is there any world you see the 76ers getting him back? I don't think so at all. They don't have enough unless you do Paul George for Jimmy straight up. But I still don't think it works with this current team either way. But is there any world you see the
I mean, I
76ers
don't
going
know.
back?
No, I don't see. I mean, like, why would you want him back? I mean, I like Jimmy, but my thing is, it's like to a point. If you're trying to blow it up, you got to blow it up. And
Hmm.
first of all, even if you get him back, like it doesn't matter until Joel Embiid plays.
Right.
Like I don't see Jimmy Butler and Tyrese Maxey, going far in the playoffs. I don't see that. And then not only that, like, and if you get them, you got to make sure that you're gonna have to re-up unless you're just getting them to swap them, and then basically you got more cap space next season, which could be fine. But I don't see it. I feel like the team that's making the biggest play for him is the Phoenix Suns, right? I feel like that's where he wants to go. It's just a matter of, are they going to give Bradley Bill what he wants in
Right.
order for him to drop his no trade clause. So to me, that seems like the best destination for him.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't work in Philadelphia. They didn't want to pay him last time. He was a little too old last time. Now they're looking at him even later in his career. But as you alluded to, the catalyst, the centerpiece, everything for this team is Joel Embiid, and people aren't going to want to come to Philadelphia, or it's not worth it making any type of trade for bringing somebody into Philadelphia if Joel Embiid can't play and if he's not able to go out there. So the 76ers, they are back in action against the Cavs. It's going to be a tough game. That's at the Wells Fargo Center on Friday night at 7 p.m. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On 76ers. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago saying so long, and we'll see you all next time.